with really cool projects that I hope to share sometime soon. I'm very excited about this topic because one of the things that I always say is that anybody can be a manager, but a leader it's something that doesn't necessarily come with a title. It comes from your ability to inspire others. And even though what we're discussing today in this presentation can be relevant to any field, the focus is in the learning function, instructional design, online learning, and the field basically. So thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, we can't wait to get into this. And I think, boy, we get into leadership, formal, informal, all that kind of stuff. I can't wait. So I'm just going to sit here and listen and behave and, sit at the foot of the master, Dr. Miko, and then we'll have a great discussion.
Yeah,
Take
I'm
it
gonna be
away.
stopping along the way. Yeah, thank you so much. So the first slide after this one that you will see there, I like to use this example because this is one of my all-time favorite movies. I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch it big, and I'm not gonna go in details over the movie. You can just watch it later. But my idea of using this example is that he was a leader, and he was just a kid. He was just a kid. He didn't have a preparation or an academic record or the experience to be a leader. But when he became part of that company, he was one of the few leaders, and you could see that the others ones were managers. And I think it was the authenticity, the way he was able to relate to people, his own experiences with those toys gave him a vision of what the business had to be like. And he was a real leader. And when I do presentations about leadership and management, that's one thing that I really focus about. It's the difference. And you will see in the next slide that many people can be a manager, as I said before, but not everybody can be a leader. A leader is something that you have to earn by inspiring others, by setting an example, by providing the vision. And the most important thing for a leader is to lift your team up. You never get jealous of your team. You never do things to block them. You will never be a leader if you have that mentality. And it's not about you, it's about the team. And somebody has to lead, obviously, but everything that you do is never thinking about you. When you decide to become a leader, it's because you are thinking about others. Something really important that can apply across any field when we talk about leadership. So, next slide. So, today we're going to be talking about really specific strategies. Of course, this is not set on the Bible, but these are things that I myself, as director of online learning, have implemented with my team, things that I have seen work, and also because I have had really bad managers and I have had good ones, but the really bad managers have shown me what not to do. And that's why bad managers are, in a way, a blessing, if I can say something like that. Because even if you don't have formal training in management and leadership, just by not doing the bad things that they did, you are starting good. So we're going to be talking about strategies. I picked 10 based on experience, and I have a bonus of extra tips there along the way. And we're going to be having a conversation. So feel free to stop me anytime if you have comments, questions. So let's get started. Okay, as a bonus strategy, and I'm sure many people are aware of this, but you still have a couple of those who are not, you have to learn to embrace remote. That's the reality. The game changed, and it's going to be harder and harder to find real talent. I was on a search committee a couple of weeks ago for an immigration specialist. It's not even about learning, and many people are wanting to be considered in a hybrid or remote role. So if you want to be a leader, today's leader in this field, you have to accept the reality of the game, because otherwise you're going to be losing talent, real good talent, because the preference that they might have is to work remote. Something to think about. One of the biggest lessons post COVID-19, I think. So the next one. So the first thing that a leader should have in instructional design or learning is the ability to forecast. I remember when I started reading about COVID-19 in January 2020, it was in Asia. It was not even something that was happening in America. But when I started to see that, I was like, eventually this can get so bad that we might have to do something to continue education through online, because they're going to be closing the schools. So, and exactly that's what happened. And because I was thinking about it and watching the news and following, in my mind, I was prepared when the academic affairs team called me to a meeting to ask me if we were ready to bring the whole university online. I was confident in my answer and I was confident in the things that we could do. because I had been thinking about it. I had been forecasting. Every time that something new happens in the world, I'm very active watching the news, reading the newspapers, following relevant social media, because those events, you have to always think how that event can affect my team. How can that event affect my learning function? When the prices of gas went up, the first thing that I thought, I might have to do something as a leader to make sure that if my team are having issues with the gas or the commutes or something like that, that can impact performance or our duties. So I have to do something to allow them to telework and things like that. So don't wait for those events to actually affect you. You as a leader need to forecast and think ahead. What do you all think? Before we go to the second one, any comments about this one? Any anecdotes?
So many.
I see.
I,
Chuck posts a lot on LinkedIn, things about current events, and he asks questions like, "How do you think this is going to affect learning in the future?" And I love those kinds of questions because it's so important to train your brain to think in that way, to think ahead, to think 5 steps ahead. What if this happened? What would I do?
And I always have a strategy when we work on projects or course design or anything associated with ISD is worst case scenario. And
Mhm,
if you go through that every time, you won't miss anything. And what you did with COVID in January 2020 is worst case scenario. You came up with this is the worst that can happen is we have to do everything remotely. And gas
mhm,
prices go up, and what's the worst case scenario? Some people can't afford to get to work, or it's a
mhm.
challenge for them, or have to sacrifice something else to be able to do that. So I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely, totally agree with you.
Well, thank you. And let's hope that, because I'm seeing that China is getting high numbers again. In
Right.
America, this is not part of the conversation as of today. But think
No.
about it. The numbers are going up there. They're already in lockdown. So I'm already thinking about the possibility if we
Hmm.
get into that scenario. So very important to forecast.
And another thing that you mentioned about remote, before we move on, before we move forward, the embrace and remote. One of the things that I'm seeing the trend of is, if you embrace that remote worker, you can cast a wider net to recruit better talent that
Mhm.
maybe you can't have in your geographical area. It's it just opens up new pathways to be able to collaborate with people with new ideas, fresh ideas from different parts of the country or even world to be able to inform your thinking on a higher level.
Absolutely, totally agree. That's you just hit it right there, because sometimes you limit yourself by not embracing online remote. That's very true. Good. So the second strategy that I have for leaders in instructional design or the learning function is to know your metrics. And it comes like common sense, you might think, but that's not always the case. Sometimes we are given the ability to lead this team. We have the ability to develop programs. We never spend time asking the administration, the organization, what exactly is your definition of success for this role? And in the next slide, you will see some of the examples that can be your metric. Is it that you want me a number of participants in a given year, or a number of consultations, what you're going to be using as a metric, or tickets closed for those more into the technical side of things, number of programs that I get to develop? Is it transfer of knowledge later on? You want to see a change in performance or behavior? Like, what's the value that you want me to bring to the organization? And you, as a leader, you are moving nowhere if you don't have a performance that it's aligned with this value that the company, the organization wants you to bring. Very important to have that conversation. Know your metrics.
That's absolutely true. And if you remember, one of the things I teach all designers is when you're working with a client, you ask what's going to make them happy. And that's how you
Hmm.
start your metrics. That's how you start your benchmarking. Here are your performance points. And this is when you get across the finish line. Everybody agrees to it. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows what color it is, what we're going to call it, and what color hair it's going to have. And if you don't go to that level of detail, especially with clients and people that you have to make happy, managers, whoever, then what you're going to do is you're going to wander around in a daze and the fog's never going to clear. And just when you think you've done it perfectly, they're all going to say, "What'd you do that for?"
Exactly.
Mhm.
And it's just questions that you ask at the beginning that can save a lot of pain and money. So have that conversation. That was one of the first things that I did in this job. I put together my action plan and I presented that to my boss. And we agree basically on that, on the metrics, the number of things he wanted me to do. And I think that was part of the success that as an office, as a team, because the whole team has a vision to follow.
Absolutely. If you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the one
Yeah.
thing that Dr. Cook taught everybody who started one of the first ISD programs, graduate programs, Dr. J. Marvin Cook. And the one thing he always said is, and he used Dallas as an example. He said, if you're going to Dallas, you need to have a map. You need to know where your stop and start points are. And he always said, this is how you think about instructional design, is you have to have a destination and you have to know how you're going to get there. And when he retired and we had an event for him at the university, I actually got him a huge map of Dallas and framed it and gave it to him. And I said, this is what you taught all of us, sir. And none of us will be the same since then. So, yeah, absolutely.
And related to that, that brings me to my third point. You don't have to wait for the organization to question your value. And that's why sometimes learning or training or instructional design are the first things that get affected when you have changes. And I think it's our own fault at times for failing to present that value to the organization. So even though I know my metrics, I'm always thinking about ways in which I can add unexpected value to prove that we are doing more than what is requested and to keep the relevance of the team present to the administration. And one of the elements that I have done is focusing on the transfer of knowledge. You will see on the next slide couple things that you can do if you need to foster transfer of knowledge after you have your intervention 6 months 1 year, having some interviews. You can have focus groups, observations if it's one of those jobs that you can actually go and see them in their natural environment performing, or the reports looking at the numbers. You can see trends by doing that data analysis. So here are some ideas, but I believe that many people are doing transfer of knowledge. It's more common now than before. Before, it was something that you rarely hear about. But I think that we have to do more. And one of the mechanisms for a leader to show that value, that extra value, can be when you actually demonstrate that your interventions foster transfer of knowledge, changing behavior, a better performance.
Absolutely. I think that's where organizations they fail. They fail to do that evaluation. That's a critical evaluation point, is to be able to
Mhm.
look 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road to see if that transfer of knowledge actually took place.
Yeah, that will have you defend your budget if somebody wants to cut it or something, you know. And as a leader, those are the things that you have to be thinking
Yeah.
about. People think that being a manager or a leader is just telling others what to do, and I'm very aware that some managers that's all they do. They just tell people what to do and they do nothing. But you, as a leader, are the ones trying to defend, advocate, thinking ahead, and making it happen. And this is one of the things. Give that extra value.
And I think something that a lot of inexperienced designers and managers, if they evolve to be leaders, forgets about in this process is when you do a level three, as Kirkpatrick would call it, and look on down the road, you might find out that you didn't need to have an intervention at all, that you didn't need to spend as much money as you did, and the real value of what you did it wasn't worth the expenditure. And then you start to benchmark what are the important things we need to focus on and where do we want to best spend our money. So the inexperienced will say, well, this is what we show after 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months. And the next level in this is, okay, that's great, but let's look at where we really could have saved our time and effort and put it in somewhere else. And that all of this expenditure was for someone's ego or because they perceived a problem that didn't exist and we therefore didn't change the metric on performance, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's, if you're watching this, remember that too. It's not just about what you come up with in terms of what people can do or remember or still perform after a period of time. It's, was this investment really necessary and useful, and what do we get from it?
Absolutely. Completely agree. Okay, so we can go to the next one. And this is probably the most important one of all because you cannot accomplish anything if you don't have a good team. And having a team, it's not the people that you are to work with. Like sometimes people believe, well, this is my team. And you don't necessarily have a team. You just have people working under you. You only have a bunch of people working in a common space, but that doesn't mean that you have a team. Building a team is something that requires true leadership because you, as the leader, have to find a mechanism to bring everybody together. It's not that you're going to silence their voices or you're going to change them so they can fit into a culture. That's really ignorant. You don't change people or you don't try to change the way they think. A team is when you have a diverse group of people, different ages, different backgrounds, different opinions, different styles for leadership, for management, for working. But using and leveraging those differences, you still make sure that everybody moves toward a mission or a common goal. So that's the definition of a team. When you build that safe space for everybody to perform being their own. And the other thing is you not promoting a toxic environment. I think the worst thing that a human being can do to another is to promote a job environment in which people go to the office and they are sobbing and crying and feeling miserable on the way to work or getting there. You know, I have friends who tell me that just driving to work already starts all this anxiety, panic attacks, headaches, and things like that. And sometimes leaders thrive into creating these divisions and those environments. I don't know many reasons why that happens, but a true leader makes sure that everybody is, to the extent that is possible, happy at work. That requires sometimes changes. When I inherited this team, because the team was already there when I came as a director, I have to figure out a mechanism to leverage their different areas of expertise. I have to make some changes. I don't play favorites. I don't say things like we're family because we're really not family. I don't. That's a cliche that I have never understood it. So I don't say things like we're a family. We are not friends, and we don't have to be family or friends. We have just to respect each other because we are teammates. And you as a leader, make sure that you deal with issues or you deal with problems in a way that nobody is pit against each other. You really have to spend time building a team and keeping an eye when you see that there are situations or conversations or interactions that jeopardize that sense of being part of a team.
That is so critical, so important. I don't know about everybody else here, but I have been part of teams like that where I have driven to work crying and having not anxiety attacks, but my heart's pounding and I'm really dreading the day ahead. And that is no way to spend your life. And it all came down to the fact that it wasn't a properly managed team. The strengths were not utilized and the weaknesses were actually highlighted. So a good leader will see the strengths in their employees and their staff, their team members, and pull those out and highlight those and find a way to make it all work together as a team.
Absolutely. So let's see the next one, which is it's a bonus and it's connected to the idea of teams. Kill unnecessary meetings. I'm gonna give you an example. Today at 2, I had a meeting scheduled, but I realized that we had made so much progress that all I needed to see was the actual final instrument ready. And then we have a common chat spot where people could share the thoughts. And that was what we did. I saved everybody an hour because I didn't feel at that moment that it was really a necessary meeting. Some people believe that that's how you build a team. No, you don't. All you do is make everybody bored and resented, and people don't want to be there. I hate those people. Sorry if hate is a very strong word. I should not have said that. I dislike those people who like to start the day with 8 a.m. meetings. Sorry to whoever do that, but nobody enjoys that. That's actually counterproductive. And I remember during the pandemic, some people were doing that as a mechanism to keep people on check. You have to be online for a meeting at 8 in the morning, and you could tell that this could have been an email, if that, because you cannot be checking on the status of thing every day. And I'm gonna mention later something that I do with my team to still keep an eye on the projects, not on people, but on the projects, without having to have these unnecessary meetings. Kill those meetings, please. Use the meetings just for the moments when you need it to build a team, for instance, or when it's really critical that everybody is providing feedback about something or you're brainstorming. But when it comes to admin things, you might be surprised how many things can be honestly just an email.
Yes, no words necessary. You are absolutely right on that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for those who are managers and ever watch this, your team will thank you later for that. And number five, connected also to the idea of building a team, is that you have to invest in professional development for your team, not only for you. You have to advocate for your team. As I said, you're nothing if you don't have a good team. And the best way of building an efficient team is promoting professional development. And there are many things that you can do. Thank God we are in this era of technology that access to information is cheaper and sometimes it's even free. So there's really no excuse for having professional development. Many people, many organizations are very selfish in a way with the professional development and making their employees too knowledgeable because they're scared that they are going to leave. They're going to get all the training and then they're going to leave and take that somewhere else. So they block, in a way, that from happening. And that's very silly because what you have to do is not block them. What you have to do is finding ways to retain them. If you're a leader, you're not worried that they're going to leave. What you are more concerned about is their growth, and you find ways for them to be the best possible version of themselves, and you find ways to retain them. So in the next slide, you will see an example of what I do for my team in terms of professional development. So I encourage them and I pay for 2 conferences per year. So connected to the areas of interest because in my team, some people are more into the instructional design, other people are more into the e-portfolios, other people more into project management. So based on that, you can pick 2 conferences. I pay for memberships so they can be members of organizations and get the free journals and get all the free professional development and build a network and connections with others in the field. I encourage them to do 1 or 2 certifications a year. My instructional designers now are getting the CPAC, the Certified Professional in Core Competencies for Accessibility. So that's a good one. I get journals and I encourage reading journals, at least 5 or so. I buy books. I love books, and we have a common library in which we trade the books. And when we are in these meetings, putting together our programs and training, hey, this book, so we share the knowledge within the team. And I give each one of them in the team a budget for them to decide how to use that fund for professional development. And again, yes, eventually I know that they might not retire from those jobs and they might go ahead and do something else. And I'm not resented that I pay for those things and they took that somewhere else, because the idea is that while they're working for you, they can implement these things. And eventually, if people leave, that's when you have to be creative to retain them, but you never block them from learning more.
I love that. Absolutely. It's so critical, so important. For me as an employee of at UMBC, I love that professional development is one of those top priorities, and they encourage it, and I take advantage of it. I mean, I've in a graduate program, and they encourage me to pursue that, and they know that what happens is I take that knowledge that I'm learning and I'm able to give value to them as an organization in ways that I wouldn't have been able to do had I not gone through this kind of training, this in-depth training. So any leader that understands that principle right there is more apt to be able to retain a team of professionals who are highly trained and highly motivated because they feel valued.
Absolutely. They feel
Well, my
valued.
takeaway from that slide and that presentation is that I want to apply for a position with you, Dr. Miko.
Me too. That's
Oh,
awesome.
well,
So if you could just send me a
thank you.
list of openings, and Denise and I will discuss this offline, and we'll see which one works for each of us.
I
Yeah.
would love to have you both. You know that will be a great addition to the team. Absolutely. I admire you both so much. But one thing that people ask me is, what happens if I don't have the money? Because that's a reality. Maybe your organization, they want to do these wonderful things, but they don't have the budget. So you as the leader have the responsibility to do something to train and to provide these things for your team. With my instructional designers, twice we have done this already. We engage into these role play situations. They come with scenarios. I tell them, think like really difficult customers with really hardcore instructional design problems, and I'm gonna act like an instructional designer, and we are gonna see how you can how you can handle a consultation like that. And that was free, and my instructional designers were taking notes because I was through a role play modeling what an instructional designer does in a difficult or in a really, really hardcore, complex consultation. And that was free, as I said. Sometimes when you are the leader and you know more than your team, then you train them. You train the trainer, which is a principle that we hear a lot in the field, yet we don't implement as much as we should. So you can teach and pass on to the new generations the things that you have learned. There are so many open access communities. The internet is full of information. I mean, there's no excuse. Even if it's not gonna be the same because you don't have the money, you still have alternatives and solutions today.
Absolutely. A lot of free things out there.
Yeah, I think Kathy agrees with you too. Create an environment where people want to stay. And it goes back to like 4 or 5 of your slides, I think. Create a place people that want to work and work for somebody they respect. And I've got some statistics when we're done with this that I'll share with you that just came out the last couple of weeks about all this. But Kathy, thanks for joining us, and I'm glad you're posting. Any other questions, please put them in there, and we'll pop them up here.
Hmm.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks for joining. So let's see the next slide. It's another bonus tip for managers and leaders. Don't be too hands off. I believe in creativity. I don't micromanage. I don't believe in micromanagement, but you cannot be completely hands off that then things get you by surprise, off guard, because you have no idea how things are performing. So, what I do with my team, we meet once a week. I meet individually with each one of them for 1 hour each week. But then my team and the whole dynamic has been so great that now we're doing 30 minutes once a week. And honestly, if things continue like this, we might just do 30 minutes every 2 weeks or so. Because we have, and I'm going to tell you later in this presentation, we have put in place a mechanism. We use a lot of project management. And we have a tool, Basecamp, and I'm going to talk more about that later, in which all the projects and everything that is happening in the office and every update with each project, it's there. So when you have a question about something or you need to follow up about something, you don't necessarily have to schedule a meeting or be meeting with your employee. You can just go there and find the information. So having project management of the learning function, that's another point that I'm going to discuss later, allows you to give some space, not to micromanage, but you still have to keep an eye because you're going to find some surprises if you don't, and that's not good. Okay.
Absolutely.
So number 6, you have to stay current with trends and technology. And it doesn't mean that you have to implement them all because you cannot be one of those people that you hear a new trend and right away you're going to believe that that's going to change the game and all of that. And nobody has that kind of time and money to be implementing every single thing that is out there. But you need to be part of the conversation. You have to be aware what's the conversation about. Because in critical moments, that's when you know you are to implement that new trend, that new technology. So you have to be aware of them because there might be a moment when that will come handy, that knowledge. Very important. I don't understand how sometimes people want to be in the field and they're not aware of the new things and how the new things that are happening can enhance the learning function.
And getting that kind of information, LinkedIn, being connected to networks of people in your industry. Any other
Mhm.
suggestions for ways that people can stay current with these trends?
Well, that goes back to the professional development. When you go to these conferences, when you read journal articles, there are many journal articles that are open access. And one thing that Chuck and I always agree on is that yeah, that technology we will have always something new with the technology. But the backbone of instructional design will always be the backbone of instructional design. So what you do with that information is like you use those new things when necessary, but you are not going to be necessarily somebody who is gonna just implement something because it's hot.
Yeah, don't ever do that.
Yeah.
As someone who made that mistake, don't ever do that. It's something I read today, which I found fascinating. It hits this on the head. The smartphone is now 15 years old. Now think about that. So it's 15 years
Wow.
ago the first iPhone came out, and I can still picture Steve up there. And one more thing, and out jumps the iPhone, right? And what they're saying now, what the futurists and the technologists that spend time thinking about the next steps is what's going to replace the smartphone, because something will. And all of this focus on the technology, it's laughable because it will change as soon as you go to bed tonight and wake up in the morning. Something will have changed. And if you think about smartphones of 15 years, that's a long time for that technology.
There's a team of people right now with these big, huge ideas, and they're like, can't wait to make it public.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, and we had a situation, I'm sure you know, not a bad situation, it's something very normal. We use Portfolio for our e-portfolio program at UNCP, but I didn't make it a portfolio program. I make it an
Mhm.
e-portfolio. So I use the instructional, the learning to guide the process. And we learned recently that Portfolio and many of the products from Instructor, Canvas, they're changing names. Had my program been focused on that technology, or had I made that technology the rock star, the face of the initiatives, I would have been freaking out by now because I would have to start from scratch. But when we are coaching the students and giving the training to faculty about the portfolios, we always say, we are teaching you how to go about the e-portfolio, the folio thinking, the learning, the documentation of that journey. That technology can change, or you can use any technology. That's completely secondary. And with this situation that we're just getting started at UNCP with the initiative, and they just changed now, I learned how important it is to never make the technology the rock star of your initiative. Because then
Never.
something happens and you're gonna be, what happens if you lose the budget, you have less money, and you're forced to use another tool? You can never give that much importance to a technology.
Yeah, forget it. Don't ever do it. Always be a designer. Don't be a technologist. Let the
Yeah.
smart people in technology come up with new stuff that you integrate. Don't get married to it, locked to it. Don't buy it
Hmm.
wholesale. Move on, because I'll guarantee you tomorrow it'll be different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. The next one.
Oh, we already did that one.
Yeah. Which is the bonus. Yeah. Don't build around technology. So as a reminder, number seven, and this is one that can get a little controversial. And I'm gonna be totally candid here. I think that when you have done the job that you supervise, you will always have an edge. Many people disagree with me, and I think the reason why they disagree with me it's because some people like to take shortcuts in their careers, and some people don't even want to do the work. Some people honestly just want to supervise without actually having to do the job. And I'm sure, and I'm very aware that you can still make it that way. But if you have a chance and you want to have an edge, add value as a leader, you should understand that job very well. I'm not saying that now you have to go through the very, very bottom and do it up. If you were lucky enough to just jump to be a director, hey, lucky you, that's great. But at least spend some time understanding the nature of the work. You have to sit down with those people, follow them for a day. So you know what's a day in the life of those positions that you supervise, how much time they spend in projects, what are those interactions with people, what are some gaps that you see when they are performing, what things can be better. So you have to understand what you're supervising, and sometimes people don't want to do that, and that's not good. Spend some time understanding the industry, and I'm going to take it a little further. I don't know why. Maybe in other fields it happens, but it's in instructional design that a lot of people want to claim that they know how to do instructional design. Many people believe that just because I taught once online, or just because I put stuff on Canvas, or just because once in my life I developed online material for training or whatever, now I'm an instructional designer, or I understand about instructional design. And that's not true. This is a field, this is a career. There are so many things in the system of instructional design, and teaching and creating content is a tiny portion of that. But you should have an understanding of the field and the industry of learning to be in a leadership role, because those are the people who make crazy decisions, insane decisions, that ruin the team and the reputation that the department can have in the overall organizational structure.
Yeah.
Very true. And I can tell you that right now I know of particular situations where people that are supervising really aren't even qualified to be part of an organization or a program. And
Mhm.
they get there by one means or another, fair enough. But the problem is they don't know how to get out of their own way. They don't know how to supervise something that they don't really know how to do or don't understand or
Mhm.
don't appreciate. And in instructional design, the example I always give is, okay, you're an instructional designer. I put gas in my car too, but I can't build a car. I can't engineer a car. And what I would say to you is you may have done one or two things, but that is 1% of what we do as instructional designers. We're
Mhm.
instructional engineers. We take all of the science about learning and the rest of it and come up with solutions to learning challenges and problems. And it just amazes me. Everybody now wants to be an instructional designer. And if you look at all the jobs that are available now, it's clear that the small percentage of people that really know what they're doing and goes to hire folks, they're not settling for people that just come in and try to ghost their way through this. And no truer word spoken, Miko, than if you're going to be a leader, you need to be able to do what you lead. You need to be
Mhm.
the best at what you do. And if you're not, you need to admit that and find people that can help you to run around the corners where you're not where you need to be on things.
Mm.
But this bluffing angle in leadership, I mean, it's so obvious to everybody else. And I'm telling you,
Mm.
folks,
Absolutely.
It's a day in the life. I like how you had said, Miko, that, shadow somebody for the day or a week or a month even to really understand what people are experiencing and what is actually, if you don't have that firsthand knowledge. There was this reality TV show. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like CEO Undercover. And it would be about CEOs of particular companies that would go in and pretend to be a new employee, and it would allow them that opportunity to understand, to feel and experience what it's like to be a frontline worker in an
Mhm.
organization that they lead. And it opened eyes all the time. And I loved watching that show because it really, to me, it drove this whole point home, is in order to be able to be an effective leader, you have to know what these people are experiencing to be able to lead them in a way
Mhm.
that motivates them and inspires them.
Yeah, I avoid, for instance, when your boss comes to a meeting and then you learn that they volunteer you up for something, because obviously they have no idea what it takes to do that and all of that. I'm going to give you an example. Online content development, those of us who have done it, we know that it takes a lot of time. It might be 3 minutes of video, but I can spend dozens of hours dealing with that, between putting together everything, editing, adding. So, but because I have done that job, I understand that if I'm going to assign that to my team, I need to give them ample time for the creation, for the feedback, and all of that. So I think that's the mistake that happens. You volunteer your team up for things, or you create a set of goals and expectations that are not realistic because you have not done the job or spent the time understanding how much it takes to do certain things.
Mm. What you just said speaks to my soul on so many different levels.
And Chuck, you're right. If you have not done that job, because okay, that's fine, then surround yourself with people who can fill in for the gaps that you have. I think the problem when you have no experience with this, and yet you wanna be calling the shots and becoming an authority without even understanding what it takes to be in the field.
Absolutely.
Cool. This is something that I really like. My next tip, it's about building smart collaborations. You don't want your team to be in silo. You want to be part of the organization. You want people to see in the learning value for the whole university or organization. And ways to do that is to build collaborations. Try to find ways or opportunities. I'm gonna be frank. Collaborations are also good when you don't have a lot of money, your budget is limited, but you know that the people next door, they have a lot of money. You can agree like, hey, you give me the money, I do the job, I'm here. Voila, we can do something great together. Or what Chuck said before, let's say that I'm a manager or a leader and I realize that I have no experience when it comes to software development. Then I might want to contact my IT department to foster and build something which I can learn and I can leverage the experience that they already have. So putting yourself in silo is not positive because you want to be part of the whole organization. But number two, it's because one of the beauties about the human nature is that we are all different and we all have strengths and weaknesses. And if you're smart about it, you know how to leverage to bring the best possible. You can achieve that when you collaborate, when you have a real collaboration. Okay, the next one. However, and as a bonus, you have to set boundaries. Because, for instance, collaboration has to be that there is something in for my department. Sometimes people have these ideas of collaborations between departments and between people, and they are not really collaborating, and you are the one doing all the job, or your department is just doing all the job, and then the other department is right there just tagging along for the credit. That's not a collaboration. And the funny part about that is because leaders don't get to do the hands-up job, they don't care because obviously they can just tell the team, you guys have to help these people with this, and they don't have to do it, so they don't care. But all you're doing, that's poor leadership, number one, because all you're doing is creating resentment in your team and making them do things that they don't see the value in, or that they don't feel they have the recognition for or the appreciation for. So again, as a leader, it's not about you. That's the thing. If you want to be a leader, it's because you are advocating and you are fighting for the rights and the well-being of that team that is working for you. And one thing that you have to do is set boundaries. No, we are busy. We cannot do that because we're busy with all other things. Or hey, I need more of these to help my team. You really need to have the confidence of setting boundaries. And one thing that I said is never go to your organization complaining if you don't have already something in place as a solution, because sometimes it takes you nowhere. If you want the help, you need to be very assertive and very specific about the things that you need or the things that you cannot do anymore, those boundaries. Okay.
Make it a
See, this
win-win.
plays in perfectly with my experience with subject matter experts and how many times they are volunteered to work on projects, but they aren't given extra time or anything else. And it's, oh, well, you need to do this anyway, plus your other job, plus everything else you need to do. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to go to managers and supervisors and on up the entire work schema to get people to appreciate the fact that if you surprise somebody with an assignment, you need to come up with a way for them to do that. Because if you add it on, they've got a bad attitude, they don't have time, you get the very basics if you get that. And this applies in so many ways, but my experience, a lot of this is about subject matter experts and those poor folks that get volunteered to do something that they don't have time to really do.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Okay, we move to the next one. This is one that I'm a big fan of. I I even have a person in my team that has the title of project manager. That was one of the first things that I had because we are working simultaneously. We have like 20 projects working at the same time, and in a given week, we have to switch gears. And we're discussing now e-portfolios, then we're discussing a certificate, then we're discussing training. So project management allows you to have a very clear sense of organization The most important thing about project management also is that you have an idea of when you are not going to be able to meet a deadline, when you have problems with the budget, when you need more resources, when one project is sucking up all the energy and all the stuff and all the time, and you don't see the value in doing that. It really presents a clear picture of everything that is happening in the office in a visual way, nonetheless. It's a mechanism for me, as I said before, to avoid meetings because we have this software, a Basecamp, and the whole story of the things that are happening in the office are documented there. And every time we have an update, you go there and you do that. So we really don't have to have unnecessary meetings for updates or catching up because you just go to Basecamp. And it took us a while because we tried a couple things until we found a tool that actually works for all of us. If you don't have the budget for a tool, you can still, even with a Word document and an Excel spreadsheet, you can still put in places project management. It's not about the tool, it's about the principles. You can still foster project management to keep the organization of your office. And when it comes to Agile, I'm a big fan of ADI. But the good thing about Agile methodologies, and that can be a whole other conversation. I'm not gonna go in detail. You can Google, and I'm gonna tell you just a little bit now. But I'm a very impatient person. I admit that I'm working on that. So I'm always wanting to have something soon to show to the clients. Or, I don't like when you're planning and then you plan more and you continue planning. And we have spent 3 months planning. I'm not like that. I need to have something tangible, and I believe that you have to start somewhere. So when you have this agile mentality, you start maybe at a smaller scale. Okay, we're gonna start with this smaller scale. We can have a prototype, we can have a pilot, we have it run. At least we have a couple of success stories there. At least we see firsthand what can be improved, and then we refine and we continue. I think that thing with ADI can be sometimes too linear, not always because you can make it work differently. And I don't want to promote that Agile has to be the best thing over ADI. It's not that. I'm not even making the models compete. I just basically, when I say Agile here, it's promoting the idea of having something to show to your client or the administration sooner than later, and being comfortable with multiple rounds of feedback and refining at all times. Your clients will always have something to see, and that's the value there.
Showing progress, it's really important to be able to show that there is some progression and there's a tangible outcome to that progression. It's really important. We've got some comments here. Let's see.
Yeah, just as a note, I see David's in there. Hi, David. We're going to have a session on Agile coming up too. I don't know when we have that scheduled. Maybe Denise has got in front of her, but
I don't have that in front
notice
of me, but
Fisher
we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, okay. So another great example from David. Yeah, that's just so exactly. So
Good.
this goes perfect example. So if you've got a group of people that expect to be doing more than listening or talking, the more you can get them hands on. I think it's absolutely it's absolutely perfect.
Applied learning.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's key.
So we go to the next one,
Hmm.
which is probably something that is gonna become my quote, my probably cliche. I say that a little too much. I tell that to my team all the time. But I believe that you as a leader, and that's probably one of the key elements between a manager and a leader, you have to take a risk. And when I say a risk, sometimes there's a negative connotation that people associate. And it's not the kind of risk necessarily that I'm talking about. When I say take a risk as a leader of the learning function, it can be things like what topic has never been discussed about learning? How can we push the envelope? This is what people know already, but what if we add something new? That's the kind of risk that I'm talking about. Proposing new things to the administration if that's what it takes to make your team stronger or more efficient. Taking a risk also means being willing to consider a whole different perspective if you see that probably that's the way to go about increasing engagement and things like that. Again, taking a risk means that you're leaving your comfort zone, and a true leader has to be comfortable doing that. And I'm gonna say even more about that. Taking a risk means that sometimes you are gonna be placed in these critical positions in which you have to defend and advocate for the vision that you have for your team in the administration. It's your job as a leader to make them see what you're trying to accomplish with that team. And sometimes you are the one person and all your team has when it comes to advocacy and making sure that they get the best possible conditions. So taking a risk has too many connotations and they don't necessarily have to do with anything negative. It has to do with your ability to, well, I'm usually a shy person and usually I don't say no, but in this instance I might have to because as I said before, it's not about you anymore, it's about your team. You have to be very, very conscious of that. If you want to be a leader and you want to be seen as a leader, your interests will have to come secondary because you're responsible for the well-being of these people. You're responsible for the overall performance, and that happens by not looking only at the job but also the people.
That's powerful.
I agree with you. And the only thing I would do is I'd call it something else. I call it being adventurous. So I always
Okay,
look for
yeah.
the new challenge. I always look for the new thing that I can do. I always look for the add on. I don't stay in my lane, but at the same time, I'm not disrespectful to those that would choose to do that. But at every point in my career, for every position I've ever had, back to being a teenager, I always looked what was around the next corner. What is the thing that I can do that adds to this or does something different? And that's why I've had numerous careers and done lots of things because I never stayed in my lane. And I hope I
Mhm.
never stay in my lane. And that involves risk taking. Maybe I've just put a different kind of wording to it, but I absolutely totally agree with you. And the other thing I would say from a managerial and leadership perspective is when you are being adventurous, make sure that you don't put anybody else at risk. You be the one that takes that challenge and
Mhm.
that jump, and you protect those that work with you to get from A to B or however you decide to do it. That's the only thing I would add to that.
Absolutely. And I think my comfort actually taking risks came from my side as a trainer. Uh, because in training, people can get bored. Sometimes the topics are dry and complex, and nobody wants to be there. And I had to take lots of risks with the content. There are a couple things that I have done that I'm like, wow, I'm surprised I didn't end up being fired or something because I sometimes took it far, but not in a disrespectful way. It was more like promoting that thought process, that thought provoking kind of question and conversation. So because I did that a lot as a trainer, I think when I became a leader, I have lost the fear of risking things and taking risks. Probably that's what helped me.
I love
Well,
the I love the idea of adventure. I really do.
Yeah,
It's a
well,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
might
there's
switch
just
to
so many
adventure
cool
instead of
things.
risk.
Yeah. Well, this is the exciting part of doing what we do as instructional designers because the field is expanding so quickly that there are so many things that we can go after and have fun with and provide new space for learning. And all of these things that you've talked about are incredibly insightful. And David and Kathy and everybody else that's watching, thank you so much for being here and pop those questions in.
Okay.
And I did a little research, so I want to share this with you because I think it adds on to this. So CNBC just published the research that they did about what people think about their work and why they stay and why they go, etc. And the one thing, well, there are actually two things that stood out to me. The first was that 50% of the folks that they talked to said they left a position because they couldn't stand who they were working for. Now let that sink in for a second.
50%.
50% have left a job because of a supervisor.
I'm surprised it's not higher than number, to be
Yeah,
honest.
but I but I'm so glad they put a number on that. And the
Hmm.
second thing they said that stuck out to me was that 34% of people right now are actively looking for other employment because of their work situation. So one third of the people that are employed right now in this country are actively seeking other employment for one reason or another. And the biggest reason was a toxic workplace. I think fifth on the list was a bad manager. But number one on the list of reasons why people are looking is toxic workplace. So if you're a manager, if you're trying to be a leader, and I think it takes a lot to be a leader these days, but you have to really think about what are you creating here, whether you call it community, whether you call it team, whether you call it family. It doesn't matter really to me. But the point being that you have to actually involve everyone that is part of this, from client to members working on projects to people working in the office to people in HR, marketing, whatever elements of these things are part of what your world is. You really have to think about this. And the golden rule I've always had as a manager, and perhaps the 2 or 3 seconds I was a leader, was number one, I take the blame for everything that goes wrong. I personally
Mhm.
take responsibility for every single thing that goes wrong. And the
Mhm.
second thing is, I never take credit for the success. I will never personally take credit when something goes well because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the
Mhm.
one that sits on someone else's shoulders. And I also don't want
Mhm.
anybody else to be placed in danger of anything that might happen as a result of a failure if everybody's played by the rules and done the best they can. So I don't know how that resonates with you two and the other folks watching, but you know, that's just kind of where I've evolved to. And Miko, you've done such a tremendous job presenting this. And I think these are important
Mhm.
issues for us to talk about because the other thing we find out is that instructional designers almost always end up being project managers, on up to vice presidents, on up to be CEOs or C suite or starting their own startups. I mean, that just seems to be the way the instructional designers go because there's such system orientation to everything that provides a vertical path. And you might be thinking I'm just putting together courses for myself. Well, in a year or two, you could be running a department or starting your own startup. It's all the same to me.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've given us some really great food for thought, Miko. Really great lesson on leadership. It's something that I took to heart, and I took notes, and I just think the things you presented had such value, and just as a
Thank
leader
you.
and as a person, just as part of a team, part of that the wheel, the cog that goes around. It's so important to be that partner for the people that you work with, to want to have a win-win situation with your clients, with your team, with those who you lead, those who lead you. If you go in there with that win-win attitude and you really look for those moments that can help shine and help bring out the strengths, then you've got an incredible result.
Well, I know for one thing, I'm going to get out my smartphone, which will soon be replaced by something else, and
Holographic.
go and go to the UNCP website for employment and see what positions are
Oh,
available with Miko. And you
I'm
and you
honored.
mentioned it's going to be. I mean, this is just so cool. Thank you so much, Miko.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. Always nice having these conversations with you. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Whoops.
Channel instructional designer. If you're a subject matter expert, teacher, trainer, manager of the function, or anyone who's just interested in learning and how it comes about, we're here for you. And some news coming up, we're going to be starting a Facebook group, and we are thinking about doing some Facebook Live um, things. So if you have any comments about that, let us know. We're trying to expand this channel, and we're trying to get the word out. Remember, always, we're not monetized. We make not a penny on this, nor will we ever. This is our love of the field and the people in it, and that's what Denise and I do.
Thanks so much for being with us.